There are times in history when silence is not absence, but a deeper presence preparing for a storm. In this episode, we journey into one of the most shadowed chapters of India's spiritual rebellion, the years when Baba was imprisoned and the mission was forced underground. But behind the bars, behind the broken bones and burnt newsletters, something luminous was burning. A Mahamantra was being revealed, a will was being tested, and a movement was being refined in fire. What unfolded was not just survival, it was transmission. From a jail cell in Patna to a whisper in a darkened sadhana hall. From fractured legs on protest lines to underground newspapers carried in silence. This was the age of the invisible warrior, where discipline became defiance and every breath was a vow. And at the heart of it all, one presence remained, calm, unshaken, watching it all unfold. Baba. You cannot arrest Dharma, now streaming in the worker. The year was 1971. The streets of Patna carried a strange weight. India was holding its breath. Ananda Marga had become a name people whispered, often with misunderstanding, sometimes with fear. But upstairs, in a quiet house where the world's noise could not reach, a different kind of moment was unfolding. Night had wrapped the city in silence. It was past 10 p.m., but in that room, time seemed to bend. Baba sat in a simple rocking chair, his white dress soft against the shadows. His face calm, lit not by lamplight alone, but by something deeper. 3 devotees were called to sit near him. A monk, a family Acharya, and 1 devoted Margi. They didn't speak much. They simply pressed their hands gently on Baba's legs, offering massage as a quiet act of reverence. Outside, the city murmured in sleep. But inside, it was as if the universe had paused, just for this. Then Baba, with the soft smile of one who holds galaxies behind his eyes, began to speak. "Do you know," he said, "that Baba Nam Kevalam is a Mahamantra? No thunder, no raised voice, just words placed with perfect stillness, like seeds in the soil of the soul." The men looked up, their hands stopped. A Mahamantra? They had chanted it before. They had felt its rhythm, but they hadn't realized it was this. Baba continued, "The 8 limbs of yoga, those are for intellectuals. But the common people?" He paused, eyes glowing. "They can find liberation just by chanting Baba Nam Kevalam." There was something in his tone that made the air shimmer. It wasn't a lesson. It was a transmission. As if he wasn't telling them the truth. He was weaving them into it. And just when they thought they'd heard the most beautiful part, Baba's voice shifted, like a river turning without warning. He began speaking about music. How this mantra could be sung to any melody. How the essence of the words was more powerful than the rhythm itself. Indian or Western, he said. It doesn't matter. Baba Nam Kevalam carries its power through all tunes. It wasn't just poetry. It was a map, a key, a bridge that would one day cross oceans and enter hearts of every background. Then, in a quiet turn, Baba shared a story from his childhood. He was 4 years old, he said. He had sweets in his pocket, milk sweets he loved. One by one, people came to him asking for some. A small boy, a young man, a grown adult, an old man. Each time, He refused. And then, the old man merged into his body, then the adult, then the youth, then the small boy. He didn't explain the story. He didn't have to. The mystery hung in the room like smoke from an invisible incense stick. You didn't need to understand it. You could feel it. Just as quickly, Baba moved to another story, this one grounded in time and space. He spoke of his father, how one night someone told him that Baba was out walking in the jungle. But Baba was asleep in his room. The father, confused, entered with a kerosene lamp, only to stumble and spill it on Baba's foot, leaving a scar. And then, without fanfare, Baba leaned forward in the rocking chair and lifted his foot, showing the devotees the mark. A scar, real, faint, but enough to turn myth into memory. Dada Krishnendu would later say that this was one of the most powerful nights of his life, not because of the things Baba said, but because of what he let them glimpse. A mantra, a mystery, a mark. From that night forward, the world outside would become darker. The challenges would grow. But something had been given. A chant, a current, a Mahamantra that would one day be sung by children, monks, doctors, farmers, prisoners, artists, even those who had never heard his name. Because it wasn't about words. It was about feeling. Bhabanam Kevalam. Love is all there is. It began quietly, almost imperceptibly. Throughout 1971, a shadow had been growing, first in whispers, then in warnings, and finally in a silence so thick it seemed to press against the very air. Ananda Marga was rising. Too fast, they said. Its schools were spreading, its relief programs growing, its monks and householders multiplying across villages, towns, and cities. The poor were being fed. The forgotten were being remembered. And the youth, those once restless and searching, were now choosing saffron robes over slogans and meditation over political rage. In quiet corridors of power, this was no longer seen as spiritual upliftment. It was becoming political discomfort. Leaders in Bihar grew increasingly uneasy. Here was a movement that taught not only how to serve, but also how to think, how to question, how to act. Ananda Marga didn't ask for permission. It moved on the strength of its own convictions, and that, in the eyes of those who feared it, made it dangerous. By late December, the decision had been made. The arrest would be silent, swift, and without trial. On the night of December 29, 1971, an order was signed behind closed doors. By morning, before the public could grasp what was happening, Baba had been taken from his residence and placed inside Patna Central Jail. There were no public statements, no charges formally announced, just a void of information. And into that void, the rumors rushed in. Across Patna, the whispers moved faster than headlines. Baba has been arrested. They're keeping him without trial. They want to dismantle Ananda Marga. At chai stalls, in temples, on college campuses, the questions hung in the air with no answers to meet them. Fear crept like mist through the hearts of Margis. Some left their homes only when necessary, walking quickly with heads lowered. Others remained indoors, unsure whether attending collective meditation might now bring unwanted attention. In the sadhana halls, a strange stillness had descended. Lamps were lit, incense burned, but often no one spoke. The usual warmth of devotional gatherings had given way to something quieter, heavier. For years, Baba had been the sun at the center of their sky. His presence was not just inspiring, it was anchoring. And now, with him behind bars, it felt as if the very sky had dimmed. Spiritual life didn't stop, but it hesitated. Centers across Bihar closed their doors. Some monks vanished underground. Others turned further inward. Many simply waited, suspended between hope and uncertainty. And while the devotees waited, so did the government. But they weren't waiting for justice. They were waiting for submission. Inside the cold stone walls of the jail, a different kind of trial was underway. Behind rusted bars, Baba sat alone. There was no bed, no mat, no cushion, just the bare cement floor beneath him and the pressure of the state bearing down from above. Yet despite the austerity of his surroundings, he remained untouched. His white robes stayed crisp and unsoiled. His back was perfectly straight. His gaze was soft, half-lidded, resting somewhere between this world and the next. His breath came slowly, evenly, like the ocean, unbothered by storms. From the small observation gate, officers watched in growing discomfort. They had seen hardened criminals break down in tears. They had seen politicians bargain and shout. But this man, this saint, he did neither. He simply sat. Days passed. Instructions from higher authorities came clearly. Break him. Convince him to dissolve the movement. Offer exile. Promise release if he would just agree to disappear. Anything to stop his growing influence. And so, they came, one by one. A police superintendent, a minister's envoy, an intelligence officer in plain clothes, all entered with practiced scripts and polished smiles. "Baba, we respect you," they began, "but these are dangerous times. If you leave the country quietly, we can resolve this peacefully. India isn't ready for your movement." But Baba said nothing. He didn't nod. He didn't refuse. He simply looked at them, not with scorn, but with a gaze that seemed to pierce through the surface, into the very rooms of their conscience. It wasn't a look that judged, it was a look that knew. One older officer, visibly shaken, finally spoke. "You're not a violent man, Baba. You haven't done anything wrong. But your followers, they threaten the balance. They challenge the order. The state must act." Still, Baba remained silent. His refusal to speak was not a resistance born of pride. It was something higher. It was instruction, an unspoken teaching about the strength of stillness. Not the stillness of resignation, but of grounded, radiant resolve. His very posture taught what no textbook could, how to remain unshaken in the face of force. Then, something shifted. A younger officer entered. He was proud, sharp, recently promoted, his eyes eager for recognition. He carried a thick file filled with fabricated charges and a voice sharpened by ambition. "Why don't you speak?" he asked, irritation lacing his tone. "Do you not understand the consequences?" Still, Baba didn't move. Frustrated, the officer slammed the file onto the desk beside the cell. "This silence. Do you think it will protect you? We can keep you here as long as we wish." Baba turned and met his eyes, not with defiance but with something much deeper. There was compassion in his gaze. Not pity, compassion. A kind of quiet love that sees the pain behind the mask. The young officer froze. His breath caught in his throat. He stepped back, confused, perhaps for the first time in his career, not by authority, but by presence. And that's when it happened. Not a flash of light, not a gust of wind, just a shift so subtle it might have gone unnoticed, if not for its timing. The ceiling fan, which had stood still for hours, began to turn. Slowly, softly, each blade cutting the air with the rhythm of something unseen. The lantern near the cell flickered, and the sweat on the young officer's brow, warm a moment ago, turned cold. He looked at Baba again, but this time, he couldn't hold the gaze. One by one, the officials left, not because they had triumphed, but because something inside them had been broken, not shattered in defeat, but dissolved in realization. They hadn't come face to face with rebellion. They had come face to face with truth. In that dim, humid cell, the government learned a lesson no textbook could teach. Baba would not bend, not to fear, not to comfort, not even to the promise of freedom. Because to him, Dharma was already freedom. And the jail? Just another place to practice it. Dada Krishnendu would later say that this moment, quiet, undocumented, and invisible to the public eye, was one of the greatest victories in the history of the mission. Because sometimes, a single breath of stillness can roar louder than any protest. You can imprison the body, but not the spirit. You can darken the cell, but you cannot extinguish the flame. The year had turned, but the air hadn't. What had begun in whispers was now a storm. Baba was still in jail, the newspapers still said little, and the world outside had not grown quieter. If anything, it had begun to scream. In Bihar, Delhi, Kolkata, and Ranchi, Margis had begun to gather, at railway stations, at court steps, at the gates of Patna jail. They came with banners, with songs, with garlands, and folded hands. They came not with rage, but with something more dangerous to a frightened regime: faith. But regimes don't fear anger. They fear presence. They fear unyielding love. And so, the police were sent in, not with words, but with sticks. The lathis came down hard. In Ranchi one morning, Dada Krishnendu stood at the front of a silent formation of sadhakas. They wore white. They carried no signs. They simply stood there, holding the space between courage and obedience. The first blow came without warning, a sharp crack across the thigh, then the shin, then the back. He didn't fall right away, but when he did, he fell with purpose, not in weakness, but in sacrifice. The pain was immediate. A fracture near the ankle, swelling like fire. But he made no sound. Later that night, he was taken to a quiet corner of a local Margis house, hidden from further assault. They wrapped his leg. They tried to keep him warm. But there was no hospital, no diagnosis, no official help, just whispers and prayers. For weeks, he remained like that, immobile in body, but far from still inside. His leg pulsed with pain, but his mind, it was somewhere else. It was inside that cell in Patna, with Baba. How strange, he thought. He was free, but Baba was in prison. And yet, Baba was glowing, while he, a disciple, a soldier of Dharma, could not even walk. He began to question, was this the price of devotion, or was this the test of it? There were moments he nearly broke, not from the pain, but from the ache of helplessness, from hearing of Baba's prolonged silence, from not being able to offer anything, not even a simple massage to the one who had changed his life. But in that very darkness, something began to rise. Not loud, not fast, like a lamp being lit inside the heart. And one morning, as the sun poured through the window of that small room where he lay, he whispered the Mahamantra, not as a chant, but as a surrender. Baba Nam Kevalam. Again and again. It wasn't healing his leg, but it was doing something else. It was straightening his spine, clearing the fog in his thoughts, reminding him he was not a follower. He was a worker. And workers don't wait to be strong before they move. They move, and strength comes in the moving. By the third week, the swelling had gone down. He could sit up. A few days later, he limped to the small puja table in the corner of the room. He placed Baba's photo back upright. It had fallen during the night, and folded his hands. Tears came. Not from sorrow, but from clarity. If this story touched something within you, and you haven't subscribed yet, we invite you to join this journey. Each video is created as a sacred offering, and your presence helps the light reach more hearts still waiting. If Baba was in jail, then his mission was outside, and he, a disciple with a broken leg, still had 2 hands, 1 heart, and a mantra that crossed all borders. When he finally left that shelter and returned to the field, he did not carry anger. He carried resolve. That leg would hurt for months, but it would never again be heavy, because it had learned what it was for, not for running from danger, but for standing in truth. And so, in silence, he walked again, not just toward Baba, but alongside him, because even in prison, Baba was leading, and outside, those who could barely walk were still following. The emergency fell on India like a sudden eclipse. It was the summer of 1975, but the air no longer breathed freedom. Radios whispered government decrees. Newspapers, once loud with criticism, had gone quiet overnight. Street corners buzzed with uncertainty, as if the soil itself were holding its breath. In the heart of Bihar, Dada Krishnendu stood at a crossroads deeper than politics. As a college student, he had once burned with the stories of India's freedom fighters, those rebels who disappeared underground to fight colonial power. He had dreamed of becoming a revolutionary, or perhaps even a priest. The caste system had embittered his faith in old traditions, and he had nearly walked into a Catholic seminary to escape Hindu dogma. But destiny rerouted him to Ananda Marga, where he discovered something electrifying. He could be both monk and revolutionary. The path of an Acharya, he realized, was not a retreat from the world, but a torch to set it alight. By 1974, he was posted again to Bhagalpur. That same year, from behind prison bars, Baba had declared that Ananda Marga newsletters were his food during the 5-year fast. So Dada began preparing one of his own, a quiet resistance disguised as ink and paper. The newsletter was named Sadvipra Samaj. He arrived at the printing press with his back straight and his mind resolved. But inside, the room vibrated with a strange unease. A senior newspaper correspondent, known for his wry grin and tired eyes, looked up from his bench and said, "Swamiji, how are you walking freely today? Haven't you heard? The state of emergency has just been declared. Ananda Marga has been banned. If the police find you, they'll arrest you on the spot." Dada blinked, as if the words hadn't landed yet. Then, calmly, he said, "No one can ban Ananda Marga. No one can arrest Dharma." The old journalist chuckled, not unkindly, but with a pitying shake of the head. But the mood turned cold when the man asked to see the newsletter. After scanning its bold criticism of the government's treatment of Baba, he paled. "They've shut down the press laws," he said. "There is no freedom of speech anymore. If you publish this, you won't just be arrested. The press workers will be arrested too." The printer hesitated. His hands trembled as he reached for the bundle of freshly printed newsletters. And then, with sorrowful eyes, he threw them into a barrel and set them on fire. The flames hissed as the words turned to ash. He returned Dada's money with folded hands. "Forgive me," he whispered. Heart heavy, Dada left without speaking. A strange wind blew through the streets as he made his way to the train station. 5 minutes after he had departed, police raided his school. Every teacher was arrested. A barefoot old man approached him near the station, brushing his hand lightly across Dada's beard and saying, Where will you live now, Swamiji? Dada, still burning from within, shoved his hand away. The man disappeared into the crowd, unnoticed. Dada caught a train to Sahibganj, the metal wheels clanking like a countdown in his ears. He arrived at the home of Professor Mandal, a respected Margi and educator. The professor looked at him with disbelief. "You don't know?" he said. "Ananda Marga has been banned. Where will you stay now?" Again, Dada replied with quiet defiance. "Who can ban Ananda Marga?" But the next morning, the answer arrived. The radio crackled with voices from every party, left, right, center, praising the ban. Political opportunists clapped for the silencing of their greatest spiritual threat. Dada's face tightened. This was no longer politics. This was war on consciousness. Later that day, a sister arrived from Calcutta. She urged him to remove his uniform. "The police are hunting down the Dadas. Those who escaped arrest have already gone underground. Please, you must not wear saffron anymore." But Dada shook his head. "I have worn this robe for over 10 years. How can I abandon it now?" Only after 30 minutes of pleading did he relent. He replaced his orange robes with common civilian clothes. As the fabric touched his skin, it felt like betrayal. He was no longer visible to the world, but neither was his vow. In the home of a Margi family, he began tutoring children, trying to earn a quiet living. He told himself this was temporary. The family introduced him to neighbors as a distant cousin. But over time, the children began to call him uncle. The parents treated him as their own. And slowly, his heart began to ache, not from danger, but from attachment. He prayed silently, "Baba, please, let me go." The next morning, he left. He traveled to Beach Chichachar and stayed with Ananda. Again, he took up tutoring, this time more guarded, but his prayers were heard. Dada Prana summoned him and gave him responsibility for the underground network across Bihar. It was the moment he had waited for. He dropped everything. From that day on, he traveled constantly. Every home became a base, every Margi a silent comrade. No one ever asked where he had come from, or where he was going. He trained young boys to distribute underground newspapers. He oversaw food supply lines. He slipped through police nets like smoke through cracks in a wall. They smuggled newsletters into jails. They spread stories of resistance. They rekindled devotion in silence. Each knock on the door was a risk. Each step, an act of surrender. And then, just like that, it ended. After 22 months, the people of India voted. The ruling party collapsed. The emergency dissolved like a fever breaking. The padlocks fell from school doors. The silence lifted. Dada Krishnendu walked into the police station in Bhagalpur, now clad again in full Acharya uniform. The saffron had returned. He said calmly, "I am here to reopen our school." The officer in charge, reading documents behind his desk, looked up and nodded. "Yes, I have instructions to cooperate with you." Then he asked, "Your name?" "Krishnendu." The officer dropped his pen. His eyes widened. "Krishnendu? You? For 2 years, you were the most wanted man in the entire state. Each time we got a tip-off, officers were flown in from Delhi to arrest you, but you always vanished, like a shadow with no trail." He leaned forward, almost smiling. "If I had caught you, I would have been promoted. They promised me 20,000 rupees." Dada laughed. "If I had known that, I would have surrendered to you myself." The officer broke into laughter, stood up, and saluted him, not as a criminal, but as a man who had walked through fire and emerged whole. Together, they walked to the school. The chains were cut. The door creaked open. And from its darkness, the light of a revolution, silent spiritual, and unstoppable, returned. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is a beautiful moment to do so. Not for numbers, but for the path we walk together. Baba Nam Kevalam. There are moments in history when justice is not blind, it is simply afraid to see. And in those moments, the weight of truth must fall upon the shoulders of one who dares to carry it. It was in the early 1970s when Dada Krishnendu found himself walking through the rust-colored gates of Bankipur Central Jail in Patna. The clang of metal echoed behind him as he stepped into a corridor that felt more like a passage between two worlds than a prison. Every step was swallowed by silence. The walls held no compassion, only the bitter scent of time. And yet, even there, behind bars meant to suppress hope, something unshakable remained, something eternal. Inside one of those cells lay Baba. He was barely recognizable. His body frail from fasting, his limbs like reeds swaying under unseen strain. His eyes, though dim with exhaustion, carried a radiant depth that no illness could touch. He lay not like a man defeated, but like a sage submerged in silence, content in a realm far beyond physical suffering. When Dada Krishnendu first laid eyes on him in that state, his chest tightened. He had seen Baba in many forms, but never like this. The tears came before he could stop them. Baba turned his head gently, and with a whisper as soft as wind through dry grass, said, "Why are you weeping? I'm the one who should weep. I'm caged, and you're free." There was no trace of self-pity in his voice, only clarity. It was not pain speaking, it was awareness. His words did not push Dada Krishnendu away. They pulled him in, like a silent bell tolling in the distance, calling the heart to awaken. Sitting nearby that day was their lawyer, Mr. Ram Thanuk Bagusa Raya, a man known for his discipline and composure, though visibly unsettled by the sight before him. They sat together in the narrow space of the cell, barely enough room for three to breathe freely. Then Baba, still lying on his cot, turned to him with quiet urgency and said something that, at the time, none of them could fully comprehend. "Bad weather is coming," Baba warned. "Tell all the Margis across India to prepare. They must stock enough food for 1 year." The lawyer looked at him, stunned. "1 year's worth of food?" he asked, unsure whether to interpret the instruction as symbolic or literal. But Baba offered no elaboration. His eyes drifted closed. A stillness settled over the room, not the stillness of sleep, but the kind that comes before a storm. None of them understood what was to come. Not yet. But those words would echo louder in the months ahead than anyone could imagine. The very next day, Baba appeared in court. The heat inside the courtroom was thick and unmoving, the ceiling fan doing little more than spreading the tension. Government officials sat on one side with stiff posture. On the other stood Baba, clad in simple white robes, calm as stone, yet alert, eyes bright with something unshakably alive. The judge, peering over his glasses, asked, "In which language should I record your statement?" Baba's reply came without pause. "I know more than 200 languages. Which do you prefer?" The courtroom fell into silence. The judge blinked, visibly thrown. Around him, even the scribes sat still, their pens hovering in midair. Was it sarcasm, humor, or something else entirely? Baba didn't wait for clarification. He added, "If you won't say, then I shall speak in English, with Cambridge pronunciation." And he did. His words emerged with rhythm and clarity, measured, precise, like pearls laid gently in the palm of time. Every sentence unfolded like the turn of a page in a carefully written scripture. The judge scribbled quickly to keep up, but Baba's eyes never left the movement of his pen. Midway through, Baba stopped. "You are placing the commas and periods in the wrong places," he said softly. "That will distort the meaning." The judge froze, caught like a schoolboy under a teacher's gaze. Baba corrected him, not with harshness, but with the grace of one who knows the power of words and will not allow truth to be bent by carelessness. When the statement was finally complete, Baba sat down. A stillness swept through the courtroom. The scribes no longer wrote. The judge sat in silence, a bead of sweat slowly making its way down his temple. Later that day, after Baba had left, the judge turned to Mr. Raya and murmured in a reverent hush, "I have never encountered such a person as Mr. Sarkar. Truly, an extraordinary personality." 2 years passed. Then came the night of June 25th, 1975, a night that would change the face of India. Radios crackled to life with a chilling announcement. A state of emergency had been declared, the Constitution suspended, civil liberties erased. The machinery of power began its silent purge. Ananda Marga workers and Margis across the country were arrested without cause or warning. In city after city, homes were raided. Fathers and sons dragged away. Mothers left to stand alone. Children waiting in silence for doors that no longer opened. And yet, there was something else. Across India, tucked away in homes of quiet devotees, were storerooms filled with grains, pulses, sacks of rice and wheat, enough to feed families for months. They had listened. They had followed the strange, inexplicable instruction whispered in a prison cell 2 years before. They had stocked food, and because of that, many survived. Not one man, not one location. Across districts, villages, entire mission, those who had trusted Baba's word lived through what would have otherwise destroyed them. It became clear then. Dada Krishnendu had not gone to jail to witness a broken man. He had gone to see a man who stood unbroken in the face of history. A man who could speak to a judge in perfect English, correct punctuation mid-sentence, and then turn around and whisper a warning meant not for that day, but for the unfolding of time itself. We once thought Baba was a prisoner, but the truth was simple and stunning. He had visited the future, and we were the ones imprisoned by what we could not yet see. You may not have lived through the emergency. You may not have walked across states with a band uniform or smuggled truth beneath your shawl. But this story still belongs to you, because the Mahamantra still breathes. The mission still calls. And in every place where fear tries to reign, love still walks, quiet, radiant, unstoppable. Baba did not give us a religion. He gave us a revolution. And whether it's sung in the street, whispered in jail, or lived in the silence between heartbeats, Babanam Kevalam was, and still is, the call of a world that refuses to forget its light. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the Worker channel. Each video is created as a sacred offering, to inspire, to remember, and to walk the path together. You can support this journey simply by clicking like, sharing it with someone who may need it, or leaving a comment below. Every action helps spread Baba's light to corners still waiting to be reached. Thank you for being part of this unfolding prachar. Babanam Kevalam. Love is all there is.